the response to missions appear like the most irresponsible action, right?
Oh,
the obedience
up.
to the Lord
What a great way to put
appears
that.
like irresponsibility to the world. The world thinks you're irresponsible, but that is what this mysterious, wonderful, spiritual, supernatural thing is. It appears irresponsible in the natural, but it is the most responsible and obedient thing you can do in the supernatural. Hey, so both of us have had the privilege to take a lot of people on short-term mission trips, and and I know for me as a pastor in a church, the process that it took to get people from exposure to volunteer to participation, telling people, hey, we have a mission trip coming up, and I sometimes have 50 people volunteer, and by the time we're actually getting on the plane to go on a short-term mission trip, we might have 10 left. And one of the awesome stories, and this is the reward of pushing through and actually doing the missions thing. And this was not a story of me personally being on the field, but one of my friends who take teams told me the story that they took a team to India, and they went to the banks of the Ganges River, and they found this lady just weeping on the side of the river. And so they're like, man, I think we need to share Jesus with her. So they went over to her, tried to settle her down and talk to her. And she told them their story through an interpreter and said she's a Hindu, single mom, and but she lives in abject poverty. And so all her life, all she wanted to do is get out of abject poverty. And so she kept going to the Hindu temple and asked the Hindu priest, what can she do for the gods to somehow help her?
Yeah.
And there was also inside of her this void of not feeling like the gods are pleased with her.
Right.
And so she's like, what can I do so that I will know that the gods are pleased with me? And so the Hindu priest would tell her, well, you got to sacrifice this, or you got to sacrifice that. And it's actually this process of giving more and more and more to the process of sacrifice that drove her into abject poverty. And one day she went to the Hindu priest and she said, I still don't feel like the gods are pleased with me, and I have nothing left to give. And so she was in the temple with her baby, and the priest said, no hope. And the priest said to her, well, you got to sacrifice something. She's like, I have nothing left to give. I've given everything I possess. And the Hindu priest looked at her and said, no, you didn't. She's like, what do you mean? And he pointed at her baby. And he said, until you're ready to make the ultimate sacrifice, the gods will not be pleased with you. And so she left the temple completely conflicted and torn with this reality that I really want to know that God or the gods affirm me or pleased with me, but I can't. This is too much. I can't give this. But the words of the priest kept ringing in her ear like, but then you cannot be approved or affirmed.
You're never there. In other words, you're stuck.
And so she went to the banks of the Ganges River, perplexed, and threw her baby into the river as a sacrifice. And as the story goes, she was so overcome with grief. And now she felt even worse than she did before, because she thought, if I did this, I would feel the affirmation of the gods.
Yeah, they're going to smile on me and fix my condition.
And we know it's a ploy from the pits of hell. And so
straight from hell.
So the team finds her minutes after she threw her baby into the river.
Wow.
And so she is distraught in a way that they said they couldn't describe. And so they share the love of Christ with her. They share the truth of the gospel with her. And in an unbelievable moment and way, she gives her life over to Christ.
Wow.
But then she says this, Britt, that is like this riveting, echoing comment that I think we all should hear. She looks at them crying and weeping and say, why didn't you come 30 minutes earlier?
Yeah.
And I think that's the echo of the nations. I mean, I think if I could capsulate, what is the world saying? What is humanity crying out to the church? Why are you not coming?
Yep.
Why are you not coming? Can you just come? We're waiting. The harvest is ready. We're waiting, but just come. And I think, one of the things both of us have observed is there are some obstacles that people face in saying yes to Jesus or responding, whether it's a short-term trip, whether it's a career on the field to become a missionary. So what I want to talk about is what are some of the excuses, right? And we can have a little bit of fun with this because it ranges everything from real legit hard sacrifice excuses to honestly just some stupid excuses, right? That people make. So I'm going to ask you on the spot to rivet your mind a little bit and let's have fun with this and talk about some of the excuses people make to go on a missions trip.
Oh, let's see. I don't have enough money. I don't want to raise support. I don't think it's honorable to ask people to support me. I can't go right now because XYZ, because I have a dog that I have to take care of right now that's special to our family. That's a real one. I have kids, and so how about this one? We had this young family, very dynamic. We're deeply moved. I mean, God was progressing in them and moving in them, and their in-laws weighed in and said, basically, if you go off on the mission field and how dare you think about taking my grandkids out there, and I'm gonna disinherit you, like you're done. If you do that, that God would never want that. It's not safe. Well, so I don't know. There's like a giant category.
I know. So let's talk about this.
And how about this? I'm handicapped. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. There's no way I can get in condition. Like there's all kinds of reasons. I'm allergic. Yeah. I think about Jason Fitzpatrick. We had this policy that the Bible says to eat what's set in front of you. Well, he's allergic to fish. So what happened to him? Well, he just dealt with the allergic reaction every time.
Yeah.
He didn't, and so like you can argue all the parameters around that, but
well, I love it when people presume they know what is responsible or irresponsible in the eyes of God, right? They
Exactly.
go like, how can you, a loving God won't ask you to do this. And it's like, actually, a loving God is asking me to do this because the response to missions appear like the most irresponsible action, right?
Oh,
the obedience
up.
To the Lord
What a great way to put
appears
that.
like irresponsibility to the world. The world thinks you're irresponsible, but that is what this mysterious, wonderful, spiritual, supernatural thing is. It appears irresponsible in the natural, but it is the most responsible and obedient thing you can do in the supernatural.
Yeah. How could you think about giving up your career to go do what? Like for what purpose? People don't get it. And as other people around them provide let's put it this way. They don't set them up for success, and they create more pressure and like resistance. They add to the weight of unhooking their life and saying yes to Jesus instead of alleviating the weight of saying yes to Jesus. And so, like in mine and Audrey's case, our families, regardless of what they may have thought, they kept their opinions to themselves, really, for the most part. Why? Because they got on our team. They backed us up. They didn't add to our weight of saying yes and all the things that families do and people say. And the thing that gets me is when a pastor weighs in and negatively, go into all the world and preach the gospel until God wants to take my favorite staff member or person in the church, and I'm going to come up with all kinds of reasons why they shouldn't go.
Yeah.
No, that's not God, or as so.
Well, yeah, anyway. I mean, the whole thing, like, that's not God. I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times. And I think we don't push back and go like, well, what is God?
Yep.
And I think one of the things I've discovered and what I've encouraged people to do is listen, you need to, and we're going to talk about this in a different episode about Jesus calling you. But even in this regard, you have to just hear the Lord And then you got to make sure you don't go seek out people who are going to convince you out of the Lord's will.
Yes.
Surround yourself with people who are going to confirm and affirm and pray with you and support you. And
then there's those people who are not, they're not excuses or reasons or hindrances. They, in the face of this intense struggle, because when you lay down your life and you give up your life, it's not just you. It's everybody associated with you gets impacted. Your mom gets impacted. Your dad gets impacted. Your siblings get impacted. Your relationship group. Everybody has to participate in the decision to say yes to Jesus in some way. And so we have a missionary that worked with us for a number of years, whose dad was a pastor, a great church, awesome man. And he called me because God started speaking to him about the fact that he's like, I think Jesus is assigning my son to work with you. And that was in his heart, that he was going to pass the church to his son. And he spent, I don't know how many years, 40 years developing the church. And that was like, he felt like this is what God is teeing up, and then all of a sudden God throws him this curveball, whack. And so instead of going, no, that's not God, you know what he did? Mm-hmm. He called me crying, saying, I think God might be doing this. And he did. He came to work with us, and then God worked it out because we had him for 5 years, and then he went back to take the church. And that whole 5 years until God spoke to this young man, no, really, this is in step and progress to prepare you, because they went all in. The dad went all in. The mom went all in. The son went all in. The daughter, his wife, went all in. It was like this disruption of, what? I didn't see that coming. Where did that come from? And so it was seemed like this incongruent thing. Curveball. And so they didn't factor what it meant. They just struggled through the struggle. And the dad there was a time where he dealt like, well, now what am I going to do?
Yeah, I think and we know this family as well. And I'm so excited that the dad said yes and the young man said yes, because that church now is the beneficiary.
Yes,
of that yes on the back end. But here's the thing that I've discovered is people truly want to say yes to Jesus, but they don't want to sacrifice anything in saying yes. They're like, Jesus, I'll say yes, but.
Or let's say it this way. It's not in their nature to sacrifice, to say yes. And some people sort of do that and other people don't.
I know. And so this sacrifice thing, sometimes it's so hilarious to me, because I've had people commit to a short-term missions trip for 2 weeks, right? We're going to go do awesome stuff. And then somehow, halfway through the preparation phase of getting ready, they discover that we're going to be gone on Super Bowl Sunday.
Oh, then all of a sudden.
God told me to stay.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know, right? And they legitimately cancel going to take the gospel somewhere, and God transforming their lives,
or how about
because they're going to miss Super Bowl Sunday.
Well, this happened, and so obviously that means it's not the right time. Like, I know God spoke to me, but I missed the time. Yeah, I missed the timing.
Yeah, and then I hear people say, God told me to go. Then 2 weeks later, they discover somehow the trip conflicts with something they want to do. Mm. And then they come back and say, well, God told me not to go anymore. And I'm like, yeah, okay, that is not the Lord. The Lord doesn't tell you to go and not go. You probably don't want to obey. And then, of course, then that opens a whole nother can.
Well,
how can you say that?
Like the threshold of requirement to be a disciple of Jesus is to deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him. Well, what is it about the cross that can ever be comfortable? It's never comfortable. Has splinters. It's rough. And it pins your hands and your feet into inaction for your selfish desires.
Okay, so say that again, because I actually think this is a good deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow him.
Every day.
But I think the way we present the gospel is follow him.
Yeah.
Deny yourself, or deny him, take up your cross. Follow him, Take up your cross, deny. So people never get to take up your cross. And even when they go like, I'll take up my cross because they have some fictitious idea of what it is. But deny yourself. And what we don't understand is you actually can't follow him until you start denying yourself.
That's right.
So we never get to deny yourself.
That's right. That's right. We don't even get to that threshold. And then we got
and yet that's where we start. That's where we're supposed to start.
That's where we're supposed to start. That's why I said it like I did. That's the threshold. It's not like the destination of a mature believer. That's the entry point for a green, brand new. It's like, and then the aggravating thing. Like honestly, the aggravating thing is when does it say daily? Because surely I can pat myself on the back. Look at me. I got 30 years or whatever, and I was a missionary, and I unhooked my life, and I did the thing, and I can throw a bunch of stuff on the table to prove how, look at me. See, I got that down, and really that becomes an excuse. Today, I gotta do it again.
Yeah.
He said today, who's it written to? It's written to me, and so it's pertinent to me, and so those things are constantly a challenge, and he means for it to be. And why? It's not about Jesus making us miserable.
No,
because the only thing that unlocks true abundance of life is his perspective and proximity to him. Well, he's not asking us to give up anything that's beneficial.
Correct. And I mean, following Jesus, and we both know this, is the most amazing journey you'll ever go on. There are miracles and supernatural everything and adventure and excitement and, but to get this package, it starts with denying yourself. And so I have found this when people say yes to, hey man, I'll go on a mission trip. It's almost like I got to convince you. It's like a marketing sales thing. Like, man, this is going to be awesome. We're going to go play golf and we're going to go fishing and it's like I got to throw in all these fun things so that I can lure you to come do this thing. And I think the mistake we make when we market missions like that, we actually work against the deny yourself process. We got to tell people like, you should do this because Jesus told you to do it.
That's right.
And it starts when you say yes, just realize the denying starts.
Yeah, because the real problem is the difference between expectation and reality. Ow, this hurts. I didn't know it was going to be like this. I don't think it should be like this. X, Y, Z. And the further apart those two things are, the harder it is for people to make it through. But it doesn't matter how big the black hole is between those 2 points. The cross is the bridge to get you across.
Correct.
Straight up. And so God has placed eternity in the heart of every single person. That's why they engage and they can hear, they can feel, they can be moved by a moment in a service or whatever. God somehow meets them and starts stirring them to a calling or an action or something he wants them to do. And then they get teed up to the line, and then it's like, uh-oh. Then details start happening, and whether it's a short-term trip or, because really anybody can hold their breath for 2 weeks or a month or whatever on a short-term trip and get through, and then they can continue to take the steps, and they unhook their life, and they do the thing, and they get enough supporters, and they get through whatever training, and they go to language school, and then boy, the rubber hits the road because now they're on the field. It's like real. And then they just hit a brick wall. And one of the first things that happens is, whoa, I didn't know. Like it didn't feel like this on my short-term trip or on my 3-month trip or on my 6-month trip. It's like to us, those are short-term things. That's not a long-term assignment. I had this wonderful equation, but now what happened? I've been here 7 days after, getting teed up, but it's real now. There's no escape route. I told everybody, they know I'm here, like I've done it, and then hell rises up because now he sees that you're serious, and then he starts real resistance, and then you're like, what happened to the spiritual warfare? Like, why doesn't it work anymore? Is there not power in the name of Jesus? Like, and then, no, we know that there is. He's all powerful. But the way things used to work, they seem not to work now. And first of all, and don't take this wrong, but if you can even get the devil's attention in the first place, he's not going to mess with you. He'll let you ride. But if you're a threat, he's going to push.
Yeah.
And he's rebellious by nature. And he doesn't yield unless he's forced to yield.
Well, and that's where our endurance comes in, right?
Yes.
You stay the course. And I mean, Paul writes a lot about this. But what I want to do is let's take it from the top down in the sense of obstacles to mobilization, whether it's short-term or long-term. So have you seen, I have, so I'll just start with saying I have, pastors becoming obstacles?
Sure. I've seen pastors be incredible enablers and really jump in there and be invaluable. The pastors in my life and the people that we surrounded ourselves with and connected with were just stellar people. Everywhere from, we had this one young man, he made it onto the mission field. He was newly married, struggling, trying to figure things out. And his former pastor weighed in at a crisis time, an emotional low point, and said, why don't you come be my youth pastor? He gave him a pressure relief valve because it felt like he is being benevolent to him. And it's pastoral. I want to help this person in this crisis mode kicked in. And it was exactly the wrong thing that young man in that moment should have been told.
Yeah.
He left the mission field. His marriage fell apart. And he only lasted as the youth pastor for a few months or whatever. I don't know the story because I know some about it, but everything from great.
So well-intended.
They're the ones in my life have helped me stay the course.
Yeah.
And they didn't go, wow, Britt, this is a really terrible situation. Why don't you leave?
Yeah.
Come up here and let us put salve on your wounds. No, why don't you come down here and help me put salve on my wounds here? And that's what they did for us. This is the difference.
Yeah, and so that's one of our values, right? Both of us is how do we help people stay?
Stay the course. Yes.
And the only way you stay is when you have a community that comes around you, starting with a pastor who understands this is a call on your life. Stay. And pastors go through this, right? I mean, pastors in their own right get assaulted. I mean, I think that's a healthy word.
Sure.
by their own congregation, by the community. And yet they stay in the saddle because it's the call on their life. Well, in the same way, we should help missionaries stay. So the next one, right? Spouse. Right? Have you ever seen spouses get in the way of a call? And I think, let me tee it up this way. I have seen people, I've officiated a lot of weddings. And I always stand there and I go man, they're making all kinds of promises to one another, but the expectation and reality quotient difference here is astronomical. And at some point, John and Sally's going to figure out, wow, we didn't quite understand what we're saying yes to. And they got to navigate that space. Now, we've seen that in the mission world, right? Where everybody has a pure heart. They want to follow Jesus. They say yes to Jesus. Husband or wife says, I'm going to be a missionary. And I want you to know up front, getting married.
This is a condition.
This is a condition. I don't want to marry you if we're not going to move to the mission field.
Oh yeah, I heard it a bunch of times.
And then spouse says, I'm in. I love you for better or worse, till death do us part. Let's go to the mission field, and click, it happens.
They
right?
exit their honeymoon and what? Statistically, there was a missiology project done that attempted to really qualify understanding for what causes missionary attrition. And then there's all these statistical categories called the REMAP project, and it's the only one that's ever really been done. And they surveyed thousands of missions organizations, big, small, medium size, and thousands of missionaries. And so it's very telling. But it's telling to me that I believe, if I remember right, that they have all these statistical things, and it's something like 98% of field missionaries who marry an outside spouse is what they kind of termed it, meaning a career missionary that's working on the field marrying a person, it can be male or female, that was not already a missionary. Okay, she married an outside, cross-cultural minister outside your home culture missionary. 98% of people who marry an outside spouse leave the field.
Yeah.
Now, some of the reason for that is the overwhelming percentage of field missionaries who marry an outside spouse were females, but not all of them. So there were a lot of males who were single who married an outside female spouse, and way high percentage, they're going to pull them off the field. And so, and part of the matrix of the questioning survey that they ran was the assumption is you know that you're called and you have a permanent, lifelong calling. 98% of people who knew that they were convinced they had a permanent, lifelong calling leave the field when they marry an outside spouse. So we've had singles jump into our training, get in the conveyor belt, and then they get married sometime in the process. If they didn't engage and begin it together, our statistics are something close to that.
Yeah.
And for various reasons. And then because then you cannot horsepower your spouse and drag them into missions. God might have a calling for you as the individual, but then you become a new individual when you get married. And one thing that he doesn't negotiate is the integrity of his first institution, which is the family. Our qualification is wrapped up in the quality of our relationship with our spouse. He doesn't mess with that. And so you trap people into this incongruence thing, but here's what we know. The call of God never stops.
Yeah.
And it's the worst thing that you ever want to be in is in the situation where the calling is still pushing you, is still alive in you, but you don't qualify. So God's hand and his calling is driving you into his hand that stops you. That's like an irreconcilable thing. It never goes away.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that those people can't be saved and that they can never have peace, but it's just like, ugh.
Well, and I do want to give a little bit of a redemptive invitation here, because, there are people that feel that.
Yep.
But now they're 50, 60, 70 years old, and maybe life circumstance have repositioned them in a different way where they're like, is it too late to say yes?
No, it's not.
And it's never too late.
It's never too late. And
it's never too late.
If you're like that and you're because there's thousands of you out there, because the understanding of calling and all those things, the yoking with your spouse is unequal, and it's just not going. It's never too late, and always just stay engaged with God. It doesn't matter, like that can come around. And because it's a hard line to draw, but the question is pertinent. The spouse issue is like one of the deals.
No, it is. And then I think the next one, parents, right? Parents, because they love their kids, and I have an 8 and a 12-year-old, so I'm thinking through this like, I know the Lord's going to require this of me at some point.
Yep.
Because I can't sit here and talk about releasing your children into the hands of God and trusting him with whatever call he has on their life, and then get in the way and not knowing that at one point God is going to ask that of me too, right?
Right.
But parents get in the way of their kids hearing the voice of God, wanting to respond,
Yep.
And especially in the realm of missions, it becomes a tenuous conversation. Now if you're going to Canada, and I'm not saying Canada doesn't have risks, or you're going to the UK or something, sometimes parents are like, okay, yeah, I can go with that.
Yeah,
but God forbid you want to go to, some Middle Eastern country or the jungles of Africa or the Amazon or something. Then parents are like, no. And they get in the way. How can we help parents process and respond a little bit more gracious in the process of helping help me, because I'm about to have kids.
I don't know how to help people because I can't identify with it. I'm glad I can't identify with it. I don't want to identify with it. To me, it is a lordship issue because I know what the Lord thinks about this. And there can be no higher purpose for a parent than raising their children in the fear and admonition of the Lord to hear God, right? And then don't meddle with that.
And here is
because you can't raise your kids to hear God, and then when they start trying to hear God, say, "Oh no, that's not God."
Well, herein, this is going to sound very insensitive.
You got to let them go, man.
I don't mean to be insensitive, but this is a real life situation. I know a person who said yes to Jesus as a young person, and their parents got in the way of their yes. And years down the line, their kid was now a drug addict.
Oh, yeah.
It's true. Completely without purpose, because they don't know what else to do with their life because this was so compelling. And when there was a no on this side, they ended in the space of complete darkness. And so I would ask a parent, and this is not a manipulative ask, it's a legitimate ask. Would you rather take the risk and support your child in obedience to God, or would you rather deal with their disobedience and their struggle in the world that later causes them to live a life of complete no purpose, no direction, and depression and emptiness? What are you saying no to when you rob them, or saying yes to when you rob them of obedience? What kind of path are you giving them as an alternative?
Straight up. And it's like, here's the thing, like any parent worth their salt wants their children to succeed and be safe.
Absolutely.
Right? We want to protect them, and that's embedded in us as parents. And like, what do we say to our adult kids or our kids that are gaining independence when they drive off in the car? Be safe, right? But believers really shouldn't have safety as our first factor. We really should send them off saying, be obedient. Because obedience and safety oftentimes do not go together. And I know what I'm talking about because right now, my son and my daughter-in-law are wanted in 7 countries because our highest value is to try to say yes to Jesus. And people can judge and say, well, you were stupid to do the stuff that you did in Nicaragua. You should have known. Well, like, what are you, dumb or whatever? No, I didn't factor all that. Yes, we knew what can happen. But I know what a trap is, living in the what if. You cannot live in the what if, because the what if will control your life and reduce you to nothing but fear. You have to live in the shadow of the Almighty, looking at Jesus, saying my highest value is saying yes to him. Of course, that predicates the fact that you got enough gumption and have done what you should to be close enough to Jesus to have confidence in the fact that you can hear him.
Yeah, and I would say, for people who say, man, I'm going to go regardless of whether my parents support me or not, there is a way to honor your parents and take them on the journey with you.
Sure.
They'll come around at some point. But I mean, I deal with that consistently still today. I mean, when I travel, sometimes I go into, earlier this year, I went to the Congo, and there's all kinds of perceptions of how dangerous it is, warlords and diseases and all kinds of whatever, right? And my own family consistently like, is this smart? Did you do it right? And I mean, because they care about their grandkids and they care about their daughter. And am I going to leave? And it's Jesus said, I just know Jesus said yes, and so I'm going to do it. And so I come back, and it actually helps reinforce their confidence that saying yes to the Lord works, right?
Well, there are some people.
So you take
some
them
parents,
on a discipleship journey.
no doubt. But there are some parents who believe that honor your parents means always do what I say. And there's no room inside them to think that God might tell them to do something that you don't want them to do.
Yeah.
And if push comes to shove, the King of Kings is going to require out of the child obedience, regardless of what the parent thinks.
So here's the pivot I believe parents should make. I believe before you weigh in as a parent on your child's decision to follow what they believe is the voice of the Lord, to go either on a short-term or a long-term missions endeavor with the Lord, rather than saying, God would not want you to do this, go to your own prayer closet and spend time with God.
Yes.
And ask God to speak to you what he would want. Rather than assuming what you think God might or may not want, go ask him, Lord, my son, my daughter wants to do something quite remarkable and I'm scared. I'm afraid. But
Straight
Lord,
up.
if this is you, I want to get in line. I want to get in support. And who knows, God might speak to you and affirm to you that this is him. And then you as a parent have a choice, because now you heard the voice of the Lord for yourself. You have a choice to either come in alignment. And parents, I know sending your kids is a sacrifice. But is there any other higher thing we can sacrifice for than for the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords?
Obedience is the thing. Yeah, that's right.
Listen, we can go down this track. Friends get in the way, convenience is getting in the way.
It's such a broad subject.
Even your pets get in the way. Your hobbies get in the way. I mean, you can go down the list. There are a lot of things that get in the way of us responding and saying yes. The bottom line is saying yes to Jesus will cost you something. And the range of what it costs increases the more you say yes.
Learn how to hear Jesus. He does speak. Do what he says. It's as simple as that.
Hey guys, thank you so much for joining the Gateway to Mercy podcast today. Please like, share, subscribe. Tell as many people as you can about us. And if you have any questions, any thoughts that you want to share, email us at gatewaytomercy@mountaingateway.org. Have a good day.